Noah, when people owe you money, how do you go about getting it back? Or do you just chalk it up?
I'm a big chalk it up guy. I don't like to have any...
Ben Simmons ain't chalking it up.
Yeah, sure. I don't like to have any monetary disputes whatsoever. I always want to lean heavily on the side of being ultra generous to anyone where I have a financial relationship with. So
if you need money, borrow it from Noah Levick, because he's going to be ultra generous. Oh, yeah, it is the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. WilmU Works, Danny Pommells, Noah Levick, Danny Pommells. So glad you could tune in and catch us. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and get those thoughts, questions, and suggestions coming our way as we're breaking down all that's happening with the Sixers right now. A couple of hot topics to get to. The NBA schedule has been released today, and the Sixers do not have an easy go of it, Noah. You have 5 takeaways on the website. I'm just looking at the way things start. 8 games, 5 of them on the road. You open the season with the 2 defending Eastern Conference champions in the Celtics and the Bucks at home. The schedule makers throwing the Sixers' feet right into the fire, and some expectations coming with it.
Indeed, yeah. I don't think you could ask for a much more difficult start. I guess the positive of that is if the Sixers are impressive and beat these teams that will test them, that builds some early season confidence. And then once they get over that initial hurdle, I think things look a lot easier. You have more stretches where there's time to rest, there's time to practice and further build your chemistry. But that initial stretch is tough, and I think on paper, the final 12 of the season is even harder. Just looking at that game by game, every single one of those teams was a top 8 finisher last year. And it feels that way. You're looking at the Suns, the Warriors, the Celtics, again, the Heat, again, the Bucks. So in between, things kind of by default are easier for the Sixers, and they should be able to stack wins. But absolutely, if they're heading into the end of the season and hoping to push for the top seed or a top 3 seed or what have you, that's not going to be a guarantee by any means. And that's definitely going to be a storyline to keep in mind as things play out over the year. But the bottom line is every team has 82, and things are ultimately pretty even if, there are situations where teams don't love how the schedule shakes out for them. But I think we will learn a lot about the Sixers right off the bat. Absolutely.
Yeah, we saw the Sixers benefit a couple years ago when they were able to really run the table at the end of the season because of the lighter schedule that they had. But we talked about the beginning of the year, Boston and Milwaukee and South Philly for the Sixers home opener. Brett Brown coming back to town on October 22nd with the San Antonio Spurs as an assistant coach. Interesting to see what kind of reception he'll receive. I would imagine it would be, warm for Brett when he returns. But we know that they'll be playing on Christmas Day against the New York Knicks. For all those Philadelphia sports fans out there, you got the Eagles on Christmas Eve and then the Sixers on Christmas Day. So not too shabby there. But before we even get to Christmas, November 22nd would be the first meeting with one Ben Simmons. Yes or no? Does he play? Yes or no? Just yes or no?
We'll say yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll say Ben Simmons plays next season.
Now, that'll be a home game, though. TNT.
Right.
And you see him on the court in South Philly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if he's going to play basketball, that will sometimes include playing the Sixers. So absolutely. Yeah. As we've talked about, there are physical and mental components with him. And it sounds like the physical one was indeed big. He got the offseason back surgery, and the expectation is he'll be good to go for training camp. We might see him before that November game, the Sixers opening their preseason in Brooklyn. But yeah, the circus-like atmosphere in South Philly will be the case regardless on November 22nd. And I'll say he plays. Let's put that down, and we'll see if that's proven correct.
Yeah. We'll get to Ben Simmons and his grievance situation and how that all played out a little bit later in the podcast. But stick with the schedule now. And the Sixers here ranked 4th among all NBA teams, I guess tied for 4th with the fourth most, or 34 national televised games. So the fourth most nationally televised games. What does that tell you about the expectations these schedule makers feel like the Sixers team might bring?
I think it's an exciting team, and it's a team that people want to watch. I think national television games don't always correspond with quality of team, and probably the Lakers are a strong example of that. They're an attractive team to have on television, regardless of how well they're playing, quite honestly. But I think the Sixers, it's a nice mix of just the entertainment value of Joel Embiid and his various antics, and James Harden, who I think a lot of opposing fans love to hate. And then just they should be quite good. They won 51 games last year. On paper, they've improved around their two main stars. And oh, by the way, Tyrese Maxey has the megawatt smile and the blazing speed and this enticing game. And perhaps, if things pan out as the Sixers envision, will rise to an all-star sort of level this year. So I think that makes sense that the Sixers should be in the national spotlight quite a lot. And Christmas, this will be their first time doing that since they had a very satisfying win over the Bucks back in 2019, which felt like an entirely different world.
Yeah.
So the Christmas spotlight's a big one, opening night, and I totally understand the NBA seeing the Sixers as a marquee team in various ways.
You mentioned the Christmas Day stuff, and I see why the Sixers are in the mix. Why the Knicks have to continue to be on Christmas Day, unless they're trading for Donovan Mitchell, like the rumor mill is saying they might. I need more star power in my Christmas Day matchups. It's like the Knicks are like the Detroit Lions. Like, no matter how good or bad they are, they're going to be in that national spotlight. Of course, that's the major TV market of all TV markets is New York. So, I mean, you see the appeal, and I don't know. I mean, Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle probably isn't enough to kind of get me super excited, but to balance that, there's nothing like the vibe of that Christmas Day matinee basketball, and it's your team. So, obviously the games are better as the night goes on in the prime time, quote unquote better. You mentioned the Lakers and how bad they were last season, as many national games as they had, but it just sets the tone. It just gives you that vibe, and that, I think back to that cool Christmas Day commercial when, Durant and Steph Curry, and they're all shooting the jump shots at Jingle Bells and things like that. It's nostalgia. And of course, people feel like that's when this NBA season really starts and whatnot. So I do like that part of it. I wish they would have had a better opponent, but I do like that matinee feel of Christmas Day.
Right. Probably another factor to consider here is the last time the Sixers played the Knicks at the Garden, it maybe wasn't the most appealing product to a television audience. If you were a Sixers fan, you loved it, but Joel Embiid set career highs and made an attempted free throws, and the Sixers just kind of ground the Knicks to a pulp and eventually pulled away down the stretch. So it wasn't the most free-flowing basketball, although James Harden was brilliant, had I think a 29-point triple-double, and you would figure he'll be, I think, playing at a really high level for this game at the Garden. But regardless, the Sixers on paper should have a nice day, I think, against the Knicks. I think they are clearly the superior team, even if that Knicks roster somehow includes Donovan Mitchell by that point. And the Sixers will, they hope, pick up a nice Christmas win.
The NBA introducing rivalry week into the slate. Things like that always pique my interest because I love, a good Red Sox, Yankees, Celtics, Lakers, just traditional animosity. I just think is intriguing. It just brings another level of, competition to the table. And the NBA not really taking any shorts. I mentioned Lakers, Celtics. Those games are right in there. The Sixers playing the Nets, and we've seen some incredible trash talking, shot making, and competitiveness between the Nets and the Sixers. Not to even mention Ben Simmons, but just Joel and Kevin Durant going nose to nose. I mean, that's what you pay the price of admission for, is to see these marquee players, bringing the best out of each other. Did it surprise you that they are going with the rivalry week? Say that 5 times fast. Did that catch you off guard, intrigue you? What was your reaction when you saw that?
No, I think it's a nice little new twist to the schedule. And I think for the most part, over the past few years, the NBA has experimented and reaped some rewards for that. I think the playing-in tournament is the biggest example. And we'll see perhaps the in-season tournament is in the mix in the near future.
Right.
But
this feels like a precursor to that. Like,
yeah, it's a little similar. Yeah. And I think that would be ideal for the in-season tournament if there's some sort of draw besides just we jam this in here, and there's no real storyline element. But yeah, regardless, the rivalry week should be cool. I'm sure fans will be tuning in a little more than usual. I do think we have no idea what the future of the Sixers Nets potential rivalry actually is, because
who even will be on that roster?
Yeah. Who knows?
Time,
yeah. It seems like
Yeah.
Ben Simmons is close to a sure thing relative to the rest of that Nets roster, but Kevin Durant, his future remains up in the air, and therefore the NBA season, I think it's difficult to feel a lot of certainty about how everything's going to play out.
Start college, build skills, and complete your degree with Wilmington University. 100% online options and affordable tuition makes WilMU work for you. Learn more at wilmu.edu.
As we transition off of this schedule release, Simmons and the Sixers coming to an agreement on settling his grievance of $20 million, which the terms weren't released. You would have to think it was in the proximity of like half of what he was owed, just in the fact that they came to a settlement, and in the spirit of fairness, you would think that they probably split it down the middle just to, make both sides happy, if I had to guess. But I think it's important that they finally got to that end, particularly here before the season started. It just cuts down on all the distractions. It gives the Sixers a chance to wash their hands and completely be moved on from the Simmons situation. And it puts them in a situation where they can be fully focused on who's in-house, what's going on here, not have to worry about questions regarding that lingering into the year and whatnot. And it just closes the book on it and moves them into a situation. And frankly, it's kind of sad the way it ended, if you really look at it, because potential and chances and opportunities weren't realized, and it just comes to a head with both teams moving on. Hopefully, the acquisition of James Harden pays dividends for the Sixers team, like so many fans here in the Delaware Valley and beyond want. And I don't think it really does the Sixers fans or the organization any favors wishing ill will on Ben or hoping that he doesn't succeed or doesn't finally reach his potential. So I think it's a great opportunity for people to take a high road and move on. Who knows what will happen when they see him in the preseason or November 22nd. But all told, I think it was a smart move to resolve it and move on and just try to close the book on that.
Right. I think relative to how much of that saga played out, this was extraordinarily amicable and taking the high road, as you said. No one has, to my knowledge, released the terms of this. Like, it has legitimately been confidential, and neither side has made it a point to leak those terms and try to spin a narrative or anything along those lines. And quite frankly, a lot of that unpleasantness, trying to use the media as a tool sort of stuff, was quite prevalent throughout much of this.
Right.
So yeah, we've in a sense moved on. As long as Ben Simmons is in the NBA, I'm sure many Sixers fans will hate him, and I was going to say strongly dislike, but I think hate is fair enough. I think Sixers fans do not like Ben Simmons, and that's going to remain the case. But now we've got a resolution, and it's interesting because I think on one hand, many fans see that as like a black and white issue with this Simmons grievance, but there were some complicating factors to consider. I'm not sure many people are aware of. He was kind of around the team sporadically. We'd hear from Doc Rivers randomly when someone would ask about Simmons. Oh yeah, we saw him at the back of our film session today. Or, oh yeah, he was working out with my son Spencer. So I think, of course, Simmons's camp was aware that he was being fined by the team for not upholding his contract in their mind, and therefore was trying to make him available for certain team activities. And I imagine all of that was, under discussion with this grievance. So coming to a resolution, not letting it linger into the season. I agree with you that from the Sixers perspective, that seems preferable to having to talk about this topic that they discussed way more than they wanted to last year.
And I think, there's a big contingent of Philadelphia fandom that is attracted to underdogs and overachievers, the TJ McConnells and, Dana Barros of the world, the people who, Vince Papale, people who kind of play outside of themselves and really commit, their all to being whatever it is that they are. The hard work, the dedication, the tenacity that Allen Iverson brought on game day, that really just relates to people. So I think on the flip side of that, wasted potential and wasted skill set and wasted opportunity really also kind of rubs Philly sports fans the wrong way. So I think that ties into a bit of that disdain for Ben Simmons. And they're like, wait, you just have all of this God-given talent and ability, but yet you choose to do things this certain way that gets in the way of that. But I think there's also a bit of karma that can be tied to, wishing the ill will as you move on. Like we've moved on, and I think it's time for people to kind of like just let it go and, boo him, hate him when he shows up in your building, but just, trolling or, just, doing things that are petty and things like that. I don't think that's going to bring the type of success or it doesn't garner that same level of respect when you're talking about believing in somebody and whatnot. And then on the flip side, you're wasting your time being petty with Ben Simmons. You know what I'm saying? So I just feel like I want sports fans to process it and move on and save the hate and the vigor and all of that for when he's actually in front of you rather than carrying it day to day. So I hope this kind of helps process that.
Right. I think all of that is easier to actually internalize and enact if your team is successful. So I'm sure a lot of this, fades to the background.
Winning is the ultimate deodorant.
Yeah. Right? And Sixers fans, in their minds, I think Sixers are the number 1 seed and finally crack the second round barrier. Ben Simmons will be far away from their minds, but it becomes a little closer to the front of the mind when those things aren't happening. But absolutely, I think I might have expressed
healing. The healing has to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think for that. Before that game last year, where everyone just hyped it up as his return and was so eager to boo Simmons and let him know how they felt. I definitely was a little uneasy about how that would play out, and not because Philadelphia fans are uniquely horrible or anything, but clearly just there was a lot of raw emotion and a lot of taking anger out on Simmons. And I was glad that, we got through that night without anything disastrous happening. Yeah. Of course, you hope the same happens in all of Ben Simmons' future appearances, but realistically, that November game, he's going to hear it big time. And every time he touches the ball, is going to be aware that Philadelphia fans despise him on a very deep level. So hopefully there's an ability to, distinguish between the on-court stuff and the off-court stuff, and to just see him along the lines of a rival opponent moving forward.
And he will be an opponent, obviously, but I think people need to be more honest with themselves about how many people out here enjoyed watching him play. I liked watching him play. He's fun to watch play first through the third quarter, but fourth quarter is hit or miss sometimes. But I rooted for him. I enjoyed watching him play. I thought they were lucky to get him. I thought, it really was, the ceiling was really high. And to just feel like, he's a player that you're going to just, eviscerate every time you see him and things like that. I don't think that would be people being truthful with how they really felt. Okay, he did things that made you feel, like you didn't like him. But on the flip side, you liked him for all the way up until that point. You know what I mean? So it's the yin and the yang, I guess. It's just there's a balance there.
Yeah, he made 3 All-Star games, and usually those players gave you a lot of enjoyable moments. And I think he also plays a really entertaining style, and he's the Defensive Player of the Year runner-up. So, yes, you absolutely can scrutinize and criticize his lack of development and correspond or consider a lot of that related to not working hard enough at various aspects of his game, but tried really, really hard on defense and was almost as talented as anyone in the league there, arguably. So I do think there were many major positives and major negatives of his time in Philadelphia, and he will be coming back here and not hearing about any of the positives. Right. I don't expect.
Nah, I mean, Philly sports fans forgive a lot, and he just has gone beyond that point of forgiveness, I think, at this point. But we can't talk about the Brooklyn Nets without talking about this sudden interest, I guess, from Kevin Durant, supposedly that the Sixers might be a team he will be willing to play with. Is that worth even Sixers fans lending their ear to, Noah? Should Sixers fans even waste their time considering what that might look like and how a trade package might be put together for a guy like Durant to be on this team? Personally, I feel like the objective of the process and all of this maneuvering with free agents and draft picks and whatnot was to try to have some sustained success. Like, the goal is to build something like the Warriors or the Spurs, or something that can be duplicated and they can stick around and be successful for a long period of time. Do I want to parade down Broad Street? Absolutely. And if Kevin Durant were the player that could help bring that, would I shy away from that? No. I want the parade if it has to come at all cost. If it has to be a situation where you put all your chips in the table and get this guy, and then finally, you get the parade, and then you're bad, maybe the next couple years after he leaves or something like that, then okay, so be it. But I don't feel like that would make me feel, great in the long run. And I'm looking for something that, if fans in general looking for something they can be prideful about, something that they can, point to as like, yeah, we got this. You know what I mean? So just like the Golden State Warriors or the Spurs had that sustained success. And I think that's more what I'm looking for. And I don't think Durant being here would bring that, as much as keeping Tyrese Maxey around or leaving your optionality available for future free agents, or not putting, trading everything you have to get this one guy. But where are you at with it?
I hear you. Yeah, I think it's tough because, like, if you're very close to a championship, which the Sixers still think they are, Kevin Durant, a Kevin Durant like trade is one that could indeed put you over the top. So just that fact alone makes it worthy of serious consideration. But I think it's interesting because the James Harden trade, my sense was many fans initially perceived that quite favorably because Ben Simmons was gone, right? Mm-hmm. And in this case, it's hard for me to imagine a Kevin Durant trade that isn't centered around Tyrese Maxey, who, in contrast to Simmons, is beloved. And I think the idea of him having untapped potential to most of this fan base sounds more realistic than with Simmons, where people are like, man, we've been hearing about Simmons' potential for years, and I just don't buy at this point that he's ever going to become a willing or competent shooter.
So you're saying in fans' eyes, they feel like they're giving up more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so much trying to draw a Maxey versus Simmons comparison, but just in terms of the personalities and their connection to the fan base, I think Tyrese Maxey is someone who makes Sixers fans proud that this is their team. And also, to your point, moving forward, the idea of Tyrese Maxey, being a Sixer when this new arena opens in 10 years, people love that idea because they get to see him grow even further,
Right.
get to know him more as a person, and just have all these experiences, with Tyrese Maxey as a cornerstone of their team. And the idea of that being taken away for a couple of years of Kevin Durant, I think sounds less appealing than landing a similarly aged superstar in James Harden, and parting with Ben Simmons in that particular case. But as far as, is it worth looking at? Is Kevin Durant a player that could lift the Sixers to championship level? It's a clear yes to me in both cases. But I think a lot of this might not end up being relevant because, of course, the Sixers are very limited compared to other potential Durant destinations in terms of what they could give up with draft picks. Really, Tyrese Maxey is by far their best sort of future-oriented, quote-unquote, asset because he's 21 years old. And if you were having a draft today, of course, he would be a top 5, top 10 pick.
And the tenuous nature of the Durant connection between the Sixers is only really bolstered by all of these complimentary things he said about Joel Embiid. Like, that is the thing that makes it seem like, oh, these superstars could really work together, or, he really might like it here because he likes Joel. If we really laid out on paper all that they had to give up to get Durant for maybe 2-3 years, I don't even know if people would be like, it would make you uncomfortable probably to see all the assets like laid out with Maxey and Thibault and Tobias and draft picks and, pick swaps and all type, it would make you uncomfortable to do all of that when you already, in some ways, you traded a guy who was 25 for a 32-year-old and still found a way to make that feel and be, a favorable move for the team. And yeah, it could be if Harden comes back healthier, obviously with the hamstring issue and more of the efficient scorer that we've seen over the years, it will feel that way and be that way. Particularly, like you said, just moving on from the Simmons situation brought its own cathartic feelings. You know what I'm saying? So, but then to even go a step further and leverage even more of the cornerstone pieces or the franchise pieces and, Maxey and these draft picks and draft considerations and things like that for a guy like Durant, who might not be who I'm a big fan of, though, by the way, but I just don't think it's the right fit. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like the step that they need to take, because it's not even a guarantee that they'll be the best team in the East, considering the Bucks, considering the Heat, considering what the Celtics are putting together and the moves they made this offseason. I mean, they look like a formidable team even after coming off of their success last season. So it's not even a guaranteed deadlock move. You know what I'm saying? Do you feel that way? Like, it's
not, but so I think the way Daryl Morey looks at things is, what is our championship probability this year, and then also in a 2 to 3 year window. So I think most likely this year, a world where the Sixers land Kevin Durant, they have a better championship probability. But then you project that out 2 to 3 years. Yeah, I think it's unlikely Durant is still at this level. And I think it is not unlikely that Tyrese Maxey is much better. And you're looking at him thriving on another team and regretting, that he's no longer a Sixer. But we talked about this before the Harden trade, just the idea of health and aging in the NBA. And I think on one hand, Durant is comparable to Harden in that he's not reliant on burst and athleticism. He can shoot over most people and is one of the best scorers, best mid-range players ever. And I don't envision that, as long as he's, not dealing with a major injury, diminishing drastically in his mid-30s. But I do think you can't avoid age, and Kevin Durant 2 years from now is probably going to be a worse player than he is now. Right. So there's this interesting calculus you have to make of how much would a Durant trade improve our odds this year, and then perhaps how much would that trade hurt our odds in 2 years, in 3 years, etc. And I think all of those sort of projections are worth considering. But yeah, the bottom line is Kevin Durant's a superstar. If he's available, if he has a relationship with James Harden, if he has this mutual competitive respect with Joel Embiid, then yeah, the idea of him on your team is something to look at for sure. I think the Rudy Gobert trade did not do the Sixers or any of these teams interested in Durant any favors, because just the idea of having to part with so many future assets to land an all-star player is something the Nets are most definitely going to reference, and it's going to be a factor in these negotiations.
I'm just going to guess, too, at Durant's age, he's not going to field the team and come out to the Danny Rumpf Classic. Like, that's not, Maxey probably is going to come back next year, and we're going to see him up close and personal playing these summer league games and whatnot. So that even that in and of itself is worth pumping the brakes on the trade. But did you feel like with all that's happened between the end of last season, the way the schedule comes out, are you feeling like this team is going to be better standings wise than they were last year?
I think they have a good chance. So yeah, last year it's interesting that so they start the season, the first 2 games are against the other 2 teams that finished 51 and 31, and the Sixers lost those tiebreakers, so they were 4th in the East. I don't think any of the East teams in that top tier got meaningfully worse. I guess Miami lost PJ Tucker and the Sixers picked him up, and that's notable. But I think the Sixers didn't, improve dramatically more than the teams they're competing against. That said, yeah, I think the Sixers have had one of the better off seasons in the league, and that should probably translate to the standings. So, yeah, I'll run through game by game, win loss, and see what I come up with. But I do feel confident that they surpass 50 wins and that a top 3 seed will be the result of that. I think they'll care a lot about playoff seeding, maybe a little more than last year, just because I do think it backfired on them somewhat, that they were a little casual in their approach late, and that led to the undesirable first-round matchup against Toronto, where one of their key rotation players was unavailable. So I think that won't be at the front of their mind, but overall, I would expect them to care more about the standings this time around. And not to say that they'll disregard the importance of their stars' health, but I do think they want a high seed, and I think they're capable of getting one.
Hey, check out Noah's 5 takeaways from this NBA schedule release on our website, NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. He can be shoot your social channels out there, Noah, so people know where to find you if they're looking for you on Twitter or whatnot.
Yeah, pretty simple. Just at Noah Levick. You can find me there, and that's the bottom line.
All right. We will see you next time on the Sixers Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU Works. I'm Danny Pommells. He's Noah Levick. And for Ben Barry, our producer extraordinaire, we'll see you next time.